Why the US and China may be on the brink of war. Hello, you're watching NDP News. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Here we dive deep into the world of geopolitics and current international affairs happening all around the globe. It's been a contentious time in American politics lately, with both the Republican and Democratic parties competing to see who can be tougher on China. This competition has only served to increase tensions between the US and China, and it's not hard to see why. What's the big deal with China? China is a major economic and political power, and its rise has been a source of concern for many in the US. Some worry that China's growth could threaten America's position as a global superpower, while others are concerned about the country's human rights record and its aggressive behavior in the South China Sea. In recent years, both parties have been pushing policies that are designed to take a tougher stance against China. For example, President Trump's trade war with China was intended to force the country to address concerns about intellectual property theft and unfair trade practices. Meanwhile, Democrats have been critical of China's human rights record and have called for greater scrutiny of Chinese tech companies like Huawei. As the presidential election approaches, it's likely that the rhetoric around China will only become more heated. Both parties will want to show that they are tough on China, and this could lead to even more aggressive policies towards the country. However, it's worth considering the consequences of such policies. China is an important trading partner for the US and a major source of goods for American consumers. A trade war with China could lead to higher prices for goods and could even harm the US economy. Moreover, taking a hard stance against China could have geopolitical consequences. China is a major player in Asia, and its growing influence in the region could be a cause for concern for the US. By pushing China away, the US could be driving it closer to other countries in the region, such as Russia and North Korea. It's also important to note that China is not a monolith. There are many voices within the country, including those who are critical of the government and who are pushing for reform. By taking a more nuanced approach to China, the US could potentially support these voices and help to bring about positive change. Now, before we dive into the rest of the video, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit those like and subscribe buttons and join the NDP News family. And with that, on we go. Is the strategy of containment fueling a new Cold War? What is containment? The policy of containment has been a cornerstone of American foreign policy since the end of World War II, originally developed as a strategy to prevent the spread of communism. Containment has since been used to address a wide range of global challenges, including the rise of Russia and China as major powers on the world stage. However, as tensions between the United States and these two countries continues to rise, there are growing concerns that the strategy of containment may be fueling a new Cold War, with potentially dangerous consequences for global stability. The origins of the containment strategy can be traced back to George F. Kennan, a diplomat and foreign policy expert who served as the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union in the late 1940s. Kennan believed that the Soviet Union was a dangerous and expansionist power, and that the best way to prevent it from spreading its influence was to contain it within its existing borders. This idea was put into practice by President Harry Truman, who adopted a series of policies aimed at containing Soviet expansionism, including the establishment of NATO and the Marshall Plan. Since the end of the Cold War, the policy of containment has been applied to a wide range of global challenges, including the rise of Russia and China as major powers. In the case of Russia, the policy of containment has focused on efforts to isolate Russia politically and economically, and to push back against its efforts to expand its influence in Europe and the Middle East. In the case of China, the policy of containment has been more focused on economic and diplomatic pressure, aimed at convincing China to play by the rules of the global order. However, the policy of containment has also had unintended consequences, including the exacerbation of tensions between the United States and these two countries. In the case of Russia, the policy of containment has contributed to a sense of resentment and mistrust between the United States and Russia, as well as a dangerous escalation in military tensions in Europe. In the case of China, the policy of containment has led to a growing sense of nationalism and assertiveness, as China seeks to assert its status as a major global power. Furthermore, the policy of containment may also be driving these countries closer together, as they seek to counter the perceived threat from the United States. This has led to the development of closer economic and diplomatic ties between Russia and China, as well as increased cooperation on military and strategic issues. If these trends continue, it is possible possible that we could see the emergence of a new axis of power, with Russia and China at its core, and potentially dangerous implications for global security. The lack of political control in Washington, a major factor in rising US-China tensions. The tensions between the United States and China have been on the rise recently, with many pointing to the lack of political control in Washington as a significant factor in the development of these tensions. The inability of the two major political parties to work together on issues related to China has created a vacuum of leadership that has been filled by hawkish politicians and interest groups, leading to an increasingly confrontational relationship between the two countries. The roots of this problem can be traced back to the 1990s, when the US began to engage more fully with China as it emerged as a major economic power. At the time, there was a widespread belief that greater economic engagement with China would help to liberalize its political system and bring it more into alignment with Western norms and values. However, this optimistic view of US-China relations proved to be short-lived. By the early 2000s, it became clear that China's rise was not simply an economic story, but a strategic challenge to the United States. China began to flex its muscles in the region, asserting its territorial claims in the South China Sea, and investing heavily in its military and high-tech industries. Meanwhile, China's leaders were cracking down on dissent at home, making it clear that they had no intention of embracing Western-style democracy. In response, US policymakers began to take a more confrontational approach to China, arguing that it was necessary to push back against China's aggressive behavior and defend American interests in the region. This hawkish stance was supported by a range of interest groups, including human rights activists, labor unions, and defense contractors, all of whom saw China as a threat to their interests. The problem with this approach, however, is that it has left Washington without a coherent China policy. Instead, US policy towards China has been driven by a series of ad hoc decisions made by different actors within the government, often without coordination or consultation with one another. This lack of coordination has allowed different interest groups to hijack the China debate, pushing their own agendas without regard for the broader strategic context. One consequence of this lack of political control has been the emergence of a new breed of China hawk in Washington. Politicians who see China as an existential threat to the United States and advocate for a more aggressive posture towards the country. These politicians have been emboldened by the Trump administration, which took a highly confrontational approach to China and placed tariffs on Chinese goods to force concessions. The problem with this approach is that it risks triggering a full-blown trade war between the two countries, which could have disastrous consequences for the global economy. Moreover, it fails to address the root causes of US-China tensions, such as China's territorial ambitions and its human rights abuses at home. To address these challenges, the United States could use a more coherent and coordinated approach to China policy, one that is grounded in a clear-eyed assessment of China's strategic ambitions and the challenges it poses to American interests. This approach will require a willingness to work with China on areas of mutual interest, such as climate change and nuclear non-proliferation, while pushing back against China's assertiveness in other areas. But what do you think of the China-US tensions? Let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to never miss any of our future videos. This is NDP News, signing off.